Every year, a handful of players go way too late in fantasy drafts, and if you land just 2 of these guys, your team is an instant title contender. So in this video, we're gonna break down 7 must-have players that I'm targeting in every draft right now. And if you don't know, I've helped over 10,000 people win more fantasy drafts by identifying players just like this. Now it's time to do it for you. Let's start with Jordan Mason, who is one of the best running backs for fantasy that I can't stop drafting and not as many people are talking about. Now, his season-long numbers, when you look at Jordan Mason, they're not gonna impress you. He finished as the RB33 in points per game last year, the RB38 overall in fantasy, but don't let that fool you because, of course, this was like a tale of 2 halves for Jordan Mason. In the 7 games where he played over 50% of the snaps, Mason averaged 14.3 fantasy points per game. That's RB1 production. And he posted 106 rushing yards per game in those contests, which would have ranked 3rd in the NFL. And then you start to kind of peel back the onions. That's a saying, right? Yeah, let's just roll with it. He was top 5 in explosive play rate last year, the amount of runs of 10 plus yards or plays of 10 plus yards he had. In terms of his efficiency, you scroll over even more, he was a top 10 running back in both yards per carry on the ground, and when you add in the receptions that he had, yards per touch, 5.4, everything was clicking for him. He had 12 breakaway runs despite his limited overall carries at the end of the day of 10 plus yards. He was breaking tackles. He was great. As you can see right here, top 5 as well, actually number 2, only behind Jahmyr Gibbs, and highest percentage of rush attempts to go for 10 plus yards last season, minimum 150 carries. 15% of his rush attempts were going for 10 plus yards. That's great. Everything looked awesome for him. Christian McCaffrey wasn't playing. Jordan Mason was dominating every week. And then on a Thursday night football game, this guy had like 75 rushing yards in the second quarter, and then he landed on his shoulder. You could see it right here. The game logs were just insane. 152, 104. You keep scrolling. People were calling him Christian McCaffrey light. 160, 98. And then he ends up getting injured, and he has 69 total yards basically at the start of the second quarter on Thursday night football. He gets banged up. He doesn't come back. The next week, he's extremely limited against Dallas, and then this starts this run with his shoulder being a problem. But at the end of the day, when he was healthy, he was great, and the Minnesota Vikings of all teams saw that. They decided to trade for Jordan Mason and then immediately sign him to an extension, a 2-year, $10.5 million extension. Not just $10.5 million though, but over $7 million of that money is guaranteed. Just for starter, just so you kind of understand this contract that Jordan Mason signed was basically similar, if not the same, has more guaranteed money as well than like what Najee Harris signed this past year on just a 1-year deal. Like Jordan Mason was one of the most sought after running backs, and he just got traded for before he could actually hit the free agency market in a year. And now here's the deal. He lands on a team where there's Aaron Jones. And I'm not going to just sit here and say like, okay, yeah, sure. Aaron Jones is turning 30 years old this year. Running backs, when they hit that age point, especially guys like Aaron Jones, a little bit undersized, dealt with a lot of injuries, including last year in the past. I'm not going to just sit here though and say like, oh, Aaron Jones is washed up. Aaron Jones is terrible, because Aaron Jones last year quietly had over 1,500 yards and was actually really good on a Minnesota Vikings solid offense. But what I will say is that between these 2 running backs, the guy who is more likely in this offense to probably see some short yardage, some third down maybe, and definitely some red zone work, or at least more than the backs behind Jones last year, is Jordan Mason, the 223-pound running back who has a lot of juice, who can break tackles and create explosive plays. There's a reason why he was added. He was added to be a complement to Aaron Jones, not a backup. This guy was paid to have a role in this offense. This was a clip that the Coach Speak Index on Twitter, a Grant account, posted recently. Vikings offensive coordinator Wes Phillips, another sign that Jordan Mason will be Minnesota's short yardage and goal line back. He basically just speaks on Mason's skill sets in those areas and what he could provide to this team. So imagine a world where Jordan Mason, even if Aaron Jones stays healthy, right? There's a world where Jones gets hurt and now Mason's the RB1 like he was last year for the 49ers. But even if Aaron Jones stays healthy, there is a realistic world where Jordan Mason is playing nearly 50% of the snaps, earning himself 10 to 14 touches a game with some red zone work, catches a pass here or there, and this is a guy that is going to see that potential work, and he's going as the 116th overall player. So we're seeing a guy with a built-in role in what is a good offense with an improved offensive line, a solid coaching staff, and he's going in the 9th to 10th rounds of drafts, and that's just like worst case scenario. That's just if he sees a normal role, right? He sees this Najee Harris role from last year of like maybe 14 carries, maybe 16 carries some games, and then if something happens to Jones, he skyrockets. So compared to where he goes right now, like Jordan Mason is currently going after Ramondre Stevenson, another guy in a split backfield who in my opinion is trending down, getting older, and has 2 other guys to compete with. I'm not as interested in that. You look at some other guys here, Javonte Williams, another guy in a split backfield who has Miles Sanders is seeing first team reps. They drafted Jaden Blue. We'll see what happens in that situation. Like, these are guys who are going 10 plus picks before Jordan Mason. I just don't agree with it. Let's scroll even more. Travis Etienne, another guy in a split backfield, but 3 different guys, and he's like the odd man out in terms of who actually likes him. Cam Scattaboo, another guy in a 3 backfield, right? With Tyron Tracy, a proven starter from last year, and a veteran in Devin Singletary. You get the theme here. There's guys going 10 to 15 to 20 picks before Jordan Mason, and I just don't think they have the same outlook at all. And speaking of Jordan Mason, the guy that he was playing for last year was Christian McCaffrey. When McCaffrey was banged up with the Achilles injuries and wasn't playing, Mason was breaking out, but McCaffrey now this year is somebody that I would consider a must-have player based on where he currently goes in drafts. And let's just get it out there right now. I know some of you watching this definitely drafted. You had the 101, maybe you got the 102 and got lucky, right? And got Christian McCaffrey last year, and it was a disaster season in 2024. We get it. It was the Achilles tendonitis that started in the preseason, and they said it wasn't a big deal, and then it was a big deal because he didn't play until he ends up coming back and playing for like not even a month and sprains his PCL, and they shut him down for the rest of the season. It was a brutal year to only get 3 actual games out of Christian McCaffrey where he wasn't even 100%. He was somewhat limited. Sure, he was putting up like 90 yards in some of these games, but he wasn't the same old Christian McCaffrey, especially not when he spent the first overall pick on it. But here's a reminder. When this guy has been healthy, he's literally been the most historic running back in fantasy. 2023, 24.5 fantasy points per game. The year before that, 21 fantasy points per game. Oh, let's keep scrolling. 29.3, 24.1. These 3 seasons of 24.1, 29.3, the best season ever by a running back in fantasy, and 24.5, those are 3 of the 5 best fantasy seasons across all positions ever. And what did those seasons have in common? Well, Christian McCaffrey was healthy. And what is right now happening for Christian McCaffrey? You can choose to believe it or not. I'm going to choose to believe it, but Christian McCaffrey has shown 0 restrictions this offseason after his injury-marred 2024. Those 0 restrictions, you can take it one step further. He's been a full participant in every single practice, OTAs, minicamp, practices leading into training camp. Every single practice, full participant. If the season was today, he'd be a full go. To add some even more confidence here, 49ers offensive coordinator Clay Kubiak said Christian McCaffrey looks awesome, want to get him the ball as much as we can. It makes sense that they want to get him the ball as much as they can because they've lost some key pieces of this offense. We already talked about Jordan Mason going to the Vikings, Deebo Samuel going to the Commanders, even Elijah Mitchell, like something that not a lot of people are talking about. Elijah Mitchell has always been banged up and injured, but when he's on the field, he's an efficient running back. He's now even gone out of this backfield. He once was a backup to Christian McCaffrey, seeing a couple of touches per game. There's just not many guys left. Isaac Correndo, sure, as a late round pick, looks interesting. They drafted Jordan James out of Oregon, who I actually like. But again, these guys are not taking away touches from a healthy Christian McCaffrey. So I look at this right now, and Christian McCaffrey, the more we make videos on it, he used to go in the second round. He's now going up into the first round of 12-team formats, the number 11 overall player. This is great. Do you know how good it feels these days to have a late round pick? Imagine having the 12th or 11th overall pick, landing Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry to start your draft. Now, I'm not somebody who's going out of my way to get 2 running backs to start my draft unless they perfectly land to me. But in this situation, Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry, okay, what about Christian McCaffrey, who has a very real chance, because we saw it just 2 years ago and plenty times in the past, of being the number 1 overall player in fantasy, and then Nico Collins, who has a very real chance, because we saw it for what, the first 4 weeks of the season last year, to be the wide receiver 1 overall. You're getting discounts on both of those guys. End of round picks right now. Like, I really like the middle, the 6th pick overall, somewhere in there. But now, because of Christian McCaffrey, late first round looks awesome. And it should also be mentioned that the offense might run through him even more because Brandon Ayuk is currently, based on the current reports as of this, it could change, of course. He seems like he's trending to miss the first week, if not first 4 weeks of the season, and be put on the PUP list. So I don't think you should overthink Christian McCaffrey in the first round of fantasy drafts, and you shouldn't overthink Calvin Ridley, another veteran who last year, Calvin Ridley, if we pull it up right now, this is a guy who led the NFL very quietly in air yards. He had over 110 air yards per game. He was seeing downfield targets left and right. It was fantastic. But the problem with him was this right here. His catchable targets ranked just 97th in the NFL. Only 59% of his targets were catchable, according to Player Profiler, which means 4 out of 10. So 2 out of 5. There's some good math for you, right? We got a brain here. 2 out of 5 of his targets were pointless. They weren't even catchable. There's no reason to even have them. That's because of terrible quarterback play. In fact, his combination of Mason Rudolph and Will Levis ranked bottom 10 in the NFL in efficiency, accuracy, total yards. It was bad. And despite this, despite one of the worst quarterback situations, arguably the worst quarterback situation in the NFL, we were still able to see an impressive stretch the second half of the season from Calvin Ridley. This is weeks 8 through 18 from RotoViz right here. In those 11 games, Ridley was averaging 14.1 fantasy points per game, over 75 yards per game, and 7.8 targets per game. This was very good. During that stretch, he had 7 out of 11 games of 12 fantasy points. He had at least 70 receiving yards in 7 out of 11 games, so he's a solid flex option for you. A wide receiver 2 production at 14 points per game. That's top 24 numbers is one way to say. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. Top 24 numbers, but now he goes as the 78th overall player. And check this out. The wide receiver 37. Calvin Ridley last year, literally, I just told you, finished as a top 24 wide receiver those final 11 games in a terrible situation, and now he goes as the wide receiver 37. So, okay, the situation must have stayed the same or somehow even gotten worse then, right? Well, if you watch football at all, you know that's not true because the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, Cam Ward, who has been looking exceptional apparently in practices and off-season scheduling right now for the Tennessee Titans, well, he's now the quarterback here, and he's an upgrade. Throws of 15-plus air yards last season in the Miami offense, 16 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 128 pass rating, EPA of 0.73. Now that's nerd talk, right? EPA of 0.73, 128 passer rating, nerd talk. What does that mean? He led all quarterbacks, and this is why he's the first overall pick, or a reason why, led all quarterbacks in college last year when throwing downfield. His efficiency on 20-plus yard throws. That's exactly where Calvin Ridley's targets weren't panning out last year, and now he is the best guy from college coming in. This is just like practice stuff, so it doesn't really matter so much, but maybe it enhances my point a little bit. Cam Ward threw a 50-yard touchdown to Calvin Ridley, and the reason I point this out is because of the 50-yard part right here. Again, what did we say at the top here? We saw not catchable targets at all. 97th in the NFL in catchable targets, 86th in target quality for Calvin Ridley. You scroll over, but he was seeing deep targets, right? He was seeing 2 deep targets per game, 32 on the season, 3rd in the NFL. He had just terrible quarterbacks. Now he has the guy who literally, he made his money, became the number 1 overall pick. A big reason why is because he could hit these downfield, intermediate, and outside throws. Then you look at what the competition could look like for Calvin Ridley this year with Nick Westbrook gone. I mean, he was like the biggest competition because he was just soaking up touchdowns last year. You get a couple of rookies. You get Tremere Deke right here. You get Alik Aminor, who has apparently been looking really good in practices. And then you get some veterans in Van Jefferson and Tyler Lockett. Now, none of these guys, when I pull it all up here, is really concerning me at all for Calvin Ridley seeing, what, a 27, a maybe 30% target share? Like, sure, Tyler Lockett has been a good player in his past, and I think for a rookie quarterback like Cam Ward, Lockett, if he gets on the field, can be pretty interesting out of the slot and give him some security. But in terms of threatening for like 5 to 6 targets per game, unless one of these rookies breaks out, which is definitely possible, I don't see Van Jefferson or Tyler Lockett these days getting 5 or 6 targets a game. Maybe there'll be a couple of games where Chig Okonkwo sees 5 or 6 targets, but consistently I would be pretty weary of that. I don't think he's a guy at the end of the season that we're going to stand up and say, oh my God, Chig Okonkwo had 110, 120 targets in this offense. No, I think it's going to be Calvin Ridley, just like he quietly did last year, seeing about 8 targets per game, is going to do that again this year, maybe even more volume if the offense improves with a better quarterback, and more efficiency on those targets means more fantasy points. Now, this situation reminds me a lot of actually Terry McLaurin heading into last year, where he never had good quarterback play in his career, and then he got a first-round pick in Jayden Daniels, and it propped up McLaurin in a major way. Before Jayden Daniels, Terry McLaurin ranked top 10 in unrealized air yards, and after Jayden Daniels, he was top 10 in deep balls completed. McLaurin's catchable target rate went from like 60%, which is exactly what Calvin Ridley was seeing last year, all the way up to 75%. If that happens at all, and Jayden Daniels was, of course, like a historically great rookie quarterback, but if we even get a little bit of that, then you're in a situation where you can start to see Calvin Ridley go from a 60% catch rate, right? If we pull up that stat again, actually, he can go from a 60% uncatchable target rate right here, 59%. If this increases to just 65 to 70% and just the same targets happen again, you're looking at a guy who easily can finish as a top 24 wide receiver, and yet again, he's going as a wide receiver 37 right now. He's going in the middle rounds of drafts, round 7 or so. I think this is a really good situation for a potential smash spot for a veteran wide receiver who we've seen be a league winner in the past during his time with Matt Ryan and the Atlanta Falcons, and now he's being slept on again. And if you want to see exactly where I have Calvin Ridley ranked, I'm actually giving away my top 50 overall rankings right now completely free. There's a link in the description below, or you can head to fantasyrankingsfree.com. That's fantasyrankingsfree.com. It's my top 50 rankings tiered. It'll show you the best and worst values. It's basically a cheat code for the early rounds of your drafts. And if you want to go even deeper and get my top 250 overall rankings and all my other draft tools and my in-season tools for the whole entire season, the Fantasy Blueprint is out right now. These are the exact tools that I use in every single one of my drafts, and over 10,000 people used last year to help them dominate their leagues. So if you want to have the best draft in your league and get the bragging rights week in and week out because you're smacking around your league mates, you can check it out right now. It's linked in the description, or you can head to jointheblueprint.com jointheblueprint.com. That is jointheblueprint.com to join the Fantasy Blueprint. Now let's go to a quarterback. And we talked about this guy somewhat recently on the channel here because JJ McCarthy is currently going as the quarterback, and we'll pull it up, the quarterback 18 in fantasy drafts. He goes outside the top 120 picks. I think he's only going to rise, I would assume, this summer because I'm making videos like this. I would assume there's some other smart analysts out there making some videos like this as well, because at the end of the day, sometimes analysis can be simple. This makes no sense, right? This makes no sense. He's been handpicked by Minnesota in the first round of the NFL draft last year, and they even passed on adding Aaron Rodgers this offseason because they want to build and mold and make sure JJ McCarthy is the guy. And now Mr. JJ McCarthy comes into an offense where he throws 2 first-round picks, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. That alone is fantastic, but then you scroll down and you say like, oh, he has a borderline, if not certainly top 5 tight end, former first-round pick in the NFL as well, and TJ Hockenson, who no matter who the quarterback has been, if it's Sam Darnold, if it's been fill-in guys like Joshua Dobbs, Nick Mullins, if it's been Kirk Cousins, they've all loved throwing to TJ Hockenson. To just go even more in depth, TJ Hockenson was a top 3 tight end in 2022 and 2023 when he's healthy. He was coming off injury last year. To go more in depth, you know how great Justin Jefferson is, arguably the second best wide receiver, if not best wide receiver in the NFL. And Jordan Addison, he's an elite wide receiver too. He was putting up nearly 16 fantasy points per game from weeks 4 to 17 last year. He was a top 20 wide receiver during that stretch. Like very quietly, Jordan Addison was great last season after those first couple of weeks. And now you combine this all together with Kevin O'Connell, who is awesome at play calling. We've said it in the past. He turns just average quarterbacks into great ones. Sam Darnold, Joshua Dobbs, Nick Mullins, go on before he even was a head coach and just an offensive coordinator, even more stuff there. And now he gets this kid, and I say kid because he's literally a kid. He's 22 years old, right? Okay, sure, man, whatever. He's a kid, right? Now he gets this kid who, if you look at JJ McCarthy, all he did in college was be efficient. All he did in college was be able to run an efficient offense and a championship offense at Michigan, completing 73% of his passes right here on Player Profiler, 9.1 yards per attempt. He just did what he was told there, and that's exactly what he's going to do in Minnesota. He's going to be put into a spot where he can elevate the offense, not have to do too much because he has the playmakers around him, the running backs in the backfield to support him and pass protect. The offensive line's great, the coaching staff, like everything is there. He just has to get dropped in and do what he did at Michigan, distribute the ball where it needs to go. Okay, now you just had a 300-yard game. You just had some rushing touchdowns. Great. And I mentioned the rushing touchdowns because he was quietly an extremely elusive runner in college. He also goes to the combine when he went there, and he ran a 4.57 40 time, which is top 6% amongst quarterbacks. That's great. If you scroll down to his rushing stats, in his second to last year in college, he had over 300 rushing yards. If you get that type of production, and he is elusive, you're probably looking at a spot. I don't think he's like a Drake May level rusher where he can have 500 plus rushing yards, but I think you could probably get like 400 and a couple of rushing touchdowns, which matters a lot, especially when you're going in round 12 or 13 of fantasy drafts. Just gives you even more of a bump up. Now, I mentioned it earlier, but Minnesota arguably has now one of the best offensive lines in football because of what they did this offseason. I mean, they're going to be getting Brian O'Neill coming back and Christian Darrisaw. They're returning this year. Darrisaw should be healthier. They spent a first-round pick on Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State. That's great. They go out and they get Ryan Kelly. We'll see what ends up happening there. Ryan Kelly, not the greatest of player. And then their final piece on the offensive line, they also signed from the Colts this offseason, and Will Fries, who was arguably the best player, one of the best players in the whole entire free agency pool. So you're looking at a situation now where you have first-round pick Donovan Jackson. Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw we know are great. Will Fries we know is great, and we'll see what we get out of Ryan Kelly at center. So you have 3 proven great offensive linemen, a first-round pick coming in who you would hope is at least average, and a veteran center in Ryan Kelly who stunk last year, but we'll see if he can return to baseline now that he's on a better offensive line. I mean, that combination of guys should make this an easy top 10, if not top 5 unit in the NFL. So now you're getting the number 20 quarterback, right? He goes as the number 18 quarterback on some sites, number 20 in consensus quarterback in JJ McCarthy. Let's look at the guys who go ahead of him and which ones I would take ahead of him. Trevor Lawrence, no. Drake May, sure, but it's close. CJ Stroud, no. Jordan Love, no. Justin Fields, I would take ahead of him. Justin Herbert, no. Brock Purdy, yes. Dak Prescott, no, right? Jared Goff all the way up here, no. So we're in a situation where I think JJ McCarthy belongs closer to like the quarterback 15 range, quarterback 14 range. I won't say he's a QB1. I'm still taking Kyler Murray. I'm still taking Drake May, Bo Nix, Justin Fields over him, but he is significantly undervalued right now in drafts, and he's a must-have player. And so is Chase Brown. And if you turned on this video and you've watched my content this offseason, you already know that I like Chase Brown a ton, so we don't have to go too much in depth on it. But for the people who are just tuning back in now because it's July and fantasy season is ramping back up, Chase Brown is one of my favorite picks in fantasy drafts right now, assuming he continues to be this late second, early third round pick. Because last year, Chase Brown, over the second half of the season, when he finally got to be the guy and Zach Moss went down with an injury, he just took the job and didn't look back. Those final 8 games, according to RotoViz, Chase Brown went from averaging 11 fantasy points per game, which is solid, a flex option for you the first half of the season, to basically doubling that the second half and averaging nearly 21 fantasy points per game. During this time, he had 116 yards per game, an insane 24 touches per game. He was the RB3 in fantasy the second half of the year. He also had the 5th most targets amongst running backs, and he was top 10 in explosive runs of 20 plus yards. He was pacing, if we look at the pace right here, for 402 touches, Christian McCaffrey type level of pacing, nearly 2,000 total yards and 13 touchdowns. Of course, he's probably not going to hold up that pace, but again, he was doing it over 8 games. Who's to say he couldn't do it over at least like 9, 10, or 11? Overall, when you factor in that hot second half of the season and the good first half of the season, you're looking at basically 1,400 yards, a little over 1,400 yards. 54 receptions is the big number we have to call out. Top 5 amongst running backs. We've talked about it all the time on this channel. The cheat codes for running backs are receptions, because obviously they lead to more yards after the catch. They lead to direct points in PPR and non-PPR formats, breakaway plays, and then also the other thing you have to talk about is the red zone work, because that leads to touchdowns. Those are the cheat codes for fantasy, and Chase Brown was getting both of those lovely things. Because despite Zach Moss being like the red zone back the first half of the season, Chase Brown still finished top 12 in red zone touches with 55. So you're seeing 55 red zone touches, you're seeing over 50 receptions. He ended up ranking at the end of the year top 5 in cheat code touches for the running back position, and it shouldn't change this year. He's still the guy. The Bengals defense still stinks, which means that they're going to have to still throw in games, which means more check down targets for Chase Brown. Oof, let me catch my breath. Sorry, I get a little bit excited when I talk about Chase Brown when he's still a 3rd round pick. Okay, now here's the offensive line, because the Bengals actually did add some things. They ended up going out there and they added Lucas Patrick, who I do think is going to be a piece of this offensive line, if not at least gives them some depth. They added Dylan Fairchild in the NFL draft, which if we pull up Dylan Fairchild, go watch any of this guy's film. Just type it on YouTube after this video, of course. Dylan Fairchild clips. This guy is absolutely aggressive. He throws guys around. For a 3rd round pick, I think he should have been a 2nd round pick. A lot of guys here on this offensive line that Dylan Fairchild is going to have a chance to play over, and at the end of the day, they're just going to get healthier. Amarius Mims comes into another year. Orlando Brown, this team is just going to get healthier. Cody Ford. I think this is an offensive line that goes from being like bottom 10 to just average, and as long as you have an average offensive line, that's fine for fantasy. In terms of the other offseason moves, the Bengals, at least this is their offensive moves from the fantasy blueprint. Again, you could go to jointheblueprint.com to check it out. Not a lot of other stuff happened here. Like in general, they add Samaje Perine, not really competition at all. They ended up drafting 6th round pick Taj Brooks. In my opinion, not really competition at all. So you're looking at a situation where it's the exact same competition as last year. 4 of these running backs make the team, maybe 3 dress per week. I think the rookie does, probably Samaje Perine. It seems like right now Zach Moss might be the odd man looking in. We'll see what happens during cutdowns, but Chase Brown is the guy once again. There's just no competitions or no real threats here. You have a prime running back at age 25 years old who was a workhorse in college football at Illinois with many games of 30 to 35 carries, and he can now do it again in the NFL. So like I said, as long as Chase Brown stays, he's the 27th overall player, which means he's a 3rd round pick. As long as he stays in this range of being like around the 20th to 30th pick in drafts, I'm going to like him at the end of the 2nd, early 3rd round. Because here's the thing. Just think about this. Let's just say you end up landing like, I don't know, CeeDee Lamb to start your draft. You're like the 5th or 6th pick. Pretty good pick, right? CeeDee Lamb, number 1 player in fantasy just a year before last. And then the turn comes back around. And you could land like Chase Brown as your RB1. And then maybe you double up and you go and you get Ladd McConkey and you just get 2 elite wide receivers. Or heck, you get lucky and Drake London falls to you. Or A.J. Brown falls to you. And now you're looking at CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, 2 top 10 picks from last year. Easily can finish there again. And Chase Brown, who was the RB3 in fantasy the second half of the season. Beautiful build. And similar to a Calvin Ridley, a middle round veteran receiver who I think is just not getting enough respect because he's not the sexy pick is Jakobi Meyers. And this has basically been Jakobi Meyers' entire career, just continuously being slept on, despite the last 3 seasons being a very talented wide receiver in fantasy. Wide receiver 29, wide receiver 24 and 20 the last 2 years. So he's been a top 24 wide receiver the past 2 years in fantasy. But despite that information, despite knowing that information, Meyers now goes as the 96th overall player. But here's the crazy part. He goes as the wide receiver 43 in fantasy. Oh my, Make this make sense. He's currently going as the wide receiver 43 in fantasy. He finished as a top 30 wide receiver for 3 straight seasons. And I would argue, and I'm about to, that his situation right now is way better than it's ever been. Because these are the quarterbacks that Jakobi Meyers has had to play with in the past. I mean, let's just look at last year. Gardner Minshew for 9 games. Oof. Aiden O'Connell for 7 games. Okay, you get a little bit more of an arm there, but still, oof. And Desmond Ridder for 1 game. You're looking at, arguably, I mentioned it earlier with Calvin Ridley and the Tennessee Titans, how their quarterback situation of Mason Rudolph and Will Levis stunk. If there was another one that you can argue was pretty bad last year, right? There's some other teams that we can talk about, but this is the Raiders. The Raiders are probably right up there with the number 1 overall pick Tennessee Titans as just having awful quarterback play. And despite this, just like Calvin Ridley found success last year, Jakobi Meyers found a lot of success in 2024 as well. Success to the tune of catching 87 passes, career high, over 1,000 yards, 293 yards after the catch. He had 129 targets last year. Again, a career high, 8.6 targets per game. And on these 129 targets, Jakobi Meyers went out there and he ended up having, and we'll pull up this tweet because I think it's pretty helpful, a 0.0% drop rate. He's the only receiver in the entire NFL since 2000, so we're talking 25 years, to have at least 95 targets and 0 drops. And he didn't just have 95 or 96 and barely meet the threshold. He had 129 targets and didn't drop a damn ball. He's reliable. And now that reliability in that career year is being rewarded in some ways because the football gods are giving him a good quarterback. Like, say what you want about Geno Smith. Geno Smith is nowhere near these guys. Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, Desmond Ridder, not starting quarterbacks in the NFL. No, Geno Smith instead is a borderline, when he gets protection and is in the right system, a borderline top 10 NFL quarterback. And now this makes things really interesting because Jakobi Meyers already had that career year last year, but that career year of finishing as a wide receiver 20 was actually even better. Because if we look at the stats from weeks 3 onward or week 4 onward, when Davante Adams got injured and then ended up getting traded away, in those 13 games, Jakobi Meyers averaged 15.5 fantasy points per game on 9 targets per game and 72 receiving yards per game. 52.5 fantasy points was good enough to be a top 15 wide receiver in fantasy last year, ahead of guys like Devonta Smith and Garrett Wilson. Yes, you know where Devonta Smith and Garrett Wilson currently go in fantasy drafts? Well, Garrett Wilson goes as the wide receiver 14, and justifiably so, and then Devonta Smith goes as the wide receiver 23, and justifiably so, because these guys are good. They're going to earn target volume. For Devonta Smith, he's in a good offense. For Garrett Wilson, he doesn't have much competition. But Jakobi Meyers, does he really deserve to go as the wide receiver 43? That big of a gap? I say no. In terms of the other team changes, we obviously got that quarterback upgrade in Geno Smith. Outside of that, though, like, yes, the offensive line is going to, we hope, be improved with a third-round tackle and Caleb Rogers added. Andre James is added as a center as well. We'll see what they can do there. But the offense in general is the big thing here. They add Ashton Jeanty. They add Jack Bech and Deontay Thornton, some wide receivers. Of course, Geno Smith. They bring in a new coaching staff with Pete Carroll, who wants to run the ball. They bring in Chip Kelly, who wants to kind of have these interesting plays and have multiple things going on at once in the offense. Experience of 5 years in the NFL, right? Some pass stops haven't worked. Then he goes back to college and he's looking great. Now he's reunited with Pete Carroll, kind of some adults in the room now for Vegas, and we'll see how that impacts the offense, especially when you have a legit veteran quarterback coming in Geno Smith. As for the competition, like, let's just scroll to the obvious. Brock Bowers is there. He set the rookie target and reception records last year, so okay, Brock Bowers is obviously going to be there in the middle of the field, but Jakobi Meyers already had a career year last year with Brock Bowers, despite terrible quarterback play. Now you're going to add Deontay Thornton, who's currently standing out in training camp or mini camp, and you're going to have Jack Bech, who we'll see what happens there. Jack Bech kind of overlaps a lot with Jakobi Meyers' role, but we'll see where he fits in. But for the most part, no major target competition was added here. We're not looking at a situation where a guy is coming in like a Davante Adams who left last year and is going to be a guy who you're instantly like, oh yeah, that guy's going to earn 25% of the targets. Nobody here is like that. And by the way, Geno Smith just made Jackson Smith-Njigba a wide receiver 1 in fantasy last year, mainly through volume. Like, if we look at Jackson Smith-Njigba, if we just look at some of his profile stats from last year, this guy put up 100 receptions, over 1,100 receiving yards. So he was top 10 in receiving yards, top 10 in receptions, top 10 in yards after the catch. He was averaging 15 fantasy points per game. He ended up just dominating, right? He had 137 targets as well, so he was 12th in that department. And I would say JSN is a better wide receiver than Jakobi Meyers, but until last year, JSN was mainly known as a slot receiver. And until last year, Jakobi Meyers was mainly known as a slot receiver, started to produce on the outside, and now gets Geno Smith to come in, who just made the second half of the season, JSN, a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. Now, I say all that to say, like, it's just possible it happens. I'm not comparing Jakobi Meyers to the skill set of JSN. I'm not saying that it's definitely going to happen again. I'm just saying, like, for him to go as the wide receiver 43 when he's never finished that bad over the past 3 seasons, and now he's in the best situation that he possibly could have with a quarterback that just propelled JSN to being a top 12 wide receiver the second half of last year, I think Meyers probably finishes closer to a wide receiver 30 once again. And if that's the case, you're getting him as a massive value right now in drafts. Now, this next player goes a lot earlier in drafts, but I still think you should draft him. And by the way, if you're not already, make sure to hit the subscribe button. When you do that, it really helps this channel grow and get seen by more people and allows me to continue to make these videos. And I want to make even more per week for you beautiful people. And that guy who goes early in drafts, but not early enough in my opinion, is Drake London, who absolutely broke out in 2024, despite Kirk Cousins being his quarterback and really falling off a cliff. If you know my content, you know that I like Chase Brown, and you know that I like Drake London. Last year, Drake London, let's get into it. He was quietly top 5 in receiving yards with over 1,200 receiving yards. He also hit, like JSN, 100 receptions. You come up to his targets here, quietly third most targets in the NFL, so everything was checking out for him. This was a guy last season that went out there. He only ran the 20th most routes, so there's even room for him to get on the field even more. Despite ranking 20th in routes run, he still ranked third in targets. What does that tell you? When he was on the field, he was being targeted. And the ways that he was used under last year, his new play caller in year one with that play caller, Zach Robinson, was great. We saw 38% of his routes out of the slot. This was a major bump up from the year before that. That's 13th most in the NFL. So like very quietly, you could talk about this at the bar when you're like, oh, like Drake London, he's an outside receiver, right? Yeah, he played over 60 or 60% of his snaps on the outside, but he was like nearly top 10 in slot wide receiver snaps. So he's kind of in some ways a slot wide receiver as well. And then very famously with Michael Penix over the final 3 games of the season, Drake London absolutely dominated. He was tied for first in 20 plus yard catches, first in yards, first in targets, 23rd in overall catches. You pull up what that ended up amounting to: 23 fantasy points per game, 13 targets per game, 117 yards per game. Now, some lesser fantasy analysts, oh no, shots fired, a diss track's on the way, right? They might say, Drake London's the wide receiver 1. He's a top 12 pick because of what he did those final 3 games. Let's be real. This is just a 3-game sample. We can't say this is anything great. Michael Penix, during his time in college, the quarterback now for the Falcons, was known to be kind of all over the place, boom or bust in some ways. Last year, we saw the booms, but there was some busts in there as well. And if that happens over an entire season, there's going to be some down games for Drake London. But that's absolutely okay because the target competition for Drake London hasn't changed at all. It's still Darnell Mooney and Ray McCloud. That's what it still is. It's still Kyle Pitts, who maybe is going to be traded. And I think Darnell Mooney is a value late in drafts. But if you look at who are the new guys here, there's no new guys here. There's nobody threatening Drake London. The offense is going to run through Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and Darnell Mooney once again. That's exactly what's going to happen. And when that happened last year, Drake London ranked top 3 in the NFL in targets. Drake London was one of the best wide receivers in real life and fantasy, and that was with a bad quarterback. This is the stat you have to keep an eye on. Yes, he had 29% of his team targets, elite, 6th in the NFL. But this one in parentheses right here, 42.4% red zone target share. Let me say that again. He had a 42.2% red zone target share. You know what that means? It means 4 out of every 10 times. Again, we're good at math. 2 out of every 5 times. That's it, right? Yeah. 2 out of every 5 times in the red zone when they threw the ball, it was to Drake London. That is elite. It was more than that. It was 42%, not 40%. Elite. Can I say it again? Elite. This is exactly what leads to your overall ceiling of a wide receiver 1 overall or finishing in the top 10. If you can get the red zone targets, if you can result in, and we'll pull up those red zone targets right now, 3rd in the NFL last year, if you can get these, the cheat code targets, deep targets of 20 plus yards, he was 14th. Red zone targets, he was 3rd. Overall, he was top 10 in cheat code targets. That's great. That's how you become a great fantasy receiver. If he does that again now with a better quarterback, with a bigger arm who can get even more downfield targets, he's looking like a smash play. Drake London is one of, if not my favorite 2nd round picks right now because of this right here. He goes towards the middle of the 2nd round, not the beginning. He's the 18th pick overall, meaning that you can literally start, and I've done this so many times, right? You start your draft, and I love that I have the 6th pick in my home league right now. Some of my friends are going to be watching this video. I'm laughing at you. CeeDee Lamb, the smack talk begins. CeeDee Lamb right here, the 6th overall pick. You can get him, and then odds are in many situations you could also land Drake London. So you're in a world right now where you're getting CeeDee Lamb and Drake London. That's like having almost a guaranteed 300 targets, knock on wood, in your first 2 picks. It doesn't get much better than that. So these are 7 must-have players that I'm targeting in every draft, and you don't have to land all these guys, but if you get just 2 to 3 of these guys, your odds of winning your league significantly increase. And your odds will also significantly increase if you nail those first 4 to 5 rounds of your draft. So make sure to get the top 50 overall rankings completely free. Link down below, or you can head to fantasyrankingsfree.com. That's fantasyrankingsfree.com. So these are the must-have players that I'm targeting in every draft because their situation's already great. But there are 5 guys out there right now that if things just click for them a little bit, they could absolutely break fantasy. Check out this video right here to see exactly who those guys are, because if you can nail one of these guys, you're going to have a leg up on all your friends and league mates, and you'll smack them around this year in fantasy.